The space station Corveche never slept. Lights stayed bright. Machines stayed loud. Money moved fast. But hunger moved faster. In the outer ring of the station, where air was thinner and hope was cheaper, a human woman stood still among the noise. Her name was Lena. She was small, thin, and shaking not from cold, but from weakness. 3 days without food had turned her legs soft and her thoughts slow. In her arms, she held her child. The child was wrapped in an old gray cloth, once white, now worn thin. The little body barely moved. Breathing was shallow. The child had not cried for a long time. Crying needed strength, and strength was gone. Lena pressed her forehead gently against the child's head. "It's okay," she whispered. Though she wasn't sure it was true, around her, the market lived like a cruel joke. Alien merchants laughed loudly. Food steamed on metal tables. Thick meat. Nutrient paste. Sweet drinks. The smell was torture. Every breath burned her empty stomach. She watched as a group of traders finished eating. They pushed their plates away. Scraps remained. Half-eaten food. Warm, fresh. Then one of them activated the disposal. Shoot! Lena's heart jumped. Before the food disappeared, she stepped forward. Her knees almost failed her, but she forced herself to stand straight. She had already lost so much. She would not lose this chance. She bowed her head. "Please," she said. Her voice came out low and broken. It did not sound like her own anymore. The traders stopped talking. They looked down at her like she was something stuck to their boots. "Please," she said again, louder this time. "May I have the scraps for my child?" For a moment, the market seemed to pause. Then laughter exploded. A tall alien with scaled skin leaned back in his chair. "Scraps?" he repeated, amused. "Human, that food costs more than you." Another trader tilted his plate so the remaining meat slid closer to the chute. "Your kind breeds too easily. Not our problem." Lena swallowed hard. She did not shout. She did not argue. She lowered herself to her knees. "I will work," she said quickly. "I will clean tables. I will carry crates. Anything. I just need food. My child hasn't eaten in 3 days." The words tasted like blood, and shame. Her hands shook as she adjusted the cloth around the child. The tiny chest rose and fell weakly. Each breath felt like a countdown. One trader leaned forward, eyes cold. "If the child dies, make another." Something inside Lena cracked, but she did not break. She bent even lower, forehead touching the metal floor. "I am begging," she whispered. The station floor was dirty, cold. She felt it against her skin and didn't care. Pride meant nothing now. Only the small life in her arms mattered. People passed by. Some looked away. Some slowed, then kept walking. Hunger was common here. Compassion was not. The disposal chute hummed. The food was about to be gone. That was when a shadow fell over her. Someone had stopped walking. Lena did not look up. She was afraid to hope. But the child moved. Just a little. A tiny hand slipped free from the cloth and curled weakly in the air. That small movement was enough. Enough for the human standing in the bay crowd to see. Enough for him to remember. Enough for him to stop pretending this wasn't his problem. His name was Jonah Hawley. And he had just seen something the galaxy never understood. A human mother with nothing left to lose. The market did not care. It never cared. It was a place built for trade, profit, and survival. Alien survival, mostly. To the merchants, Lena was nothing more than another human begging for attention. Weak, frightened, pathetic. She stayed on her knees, her forehead pressed to the cold metal floor. Her fingers clutched the cloth around her child, as if letting go for even a moment could destroy the fragile life within. The child made a soft sound, a tiny whimper that broke through the din of the market. Lena's heart twisted. Each second without food was a knife. Each passing moment without mercy felt endless. "Human," the tallest merchant said, his voice sharp, cold, and mocking. "You think begging will feed your child? This is not your world. This is not your life. You are nothing here." Lena did not flinch. Her voice came out quiet, trembling but steady. I can work. I will clean. I will carry your crates. I will do anything, please. Just give us the scraps. That is all we need." Another merchant snorted and pushed a plate closer to the disposal chute. Half-eaten meat slid toward the abyss. "Do you hear yourself?" he said. "A human begging for scraps. Pathetic. If your child dies, maybe your species will learn." The words hit Lena like icy water. Her chest felt tight. Her throat burned. But she did not cry out. She only whispered, "Please. I am begging for my child. For life. That is all I ask." The child stirred, tiny fingers clutching the edge of the cloth. Weak breaths came, shallow and uneven. Lena pressed her lips to the child's forehead. "Hold on," she whispered. "Just hold on. Mommy is here." People walked by, some glancing with curiosity, some ignoring completely. The air smelled of spices, cooked meat, and cold metal. Traders laughed and shouted, haggled over prices, or argued about shipments. No one paid attention to the human mother on the floor. No one cared then a shadow moved differently. A presence that was not part of the chaos. Lena did not dare hope, but her body reacted instinctively. She lifted her head slightly, and in that small movement, she saw him, another human. He was tall, his armor scratched and worn, his boots dusty from 100 stations. His eyes were calm, sharp, and quiet, the kind of eyes that had seen war and cruelty, but still held a threat of humanity. His name was Jonah Hale, and at that moment, he stopped walking. The merchants noticed him too. One hissed, "This doesn't concern you, human. Move along." Jonah's gaze did not shift. He looked at Lena, at the child, at the hollowness in their eyes. "It does," he said, his voice low but firm. The traders laughed, thinking him weak. One stepped closer, raising a clawed hand in challenge. "And why should it? You see a beggar, human, and suddenly you care." Jonah crouched slightly, careful not to startle Lena. He reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar, a dense, hard piece of human military food, enough for one full meal. He held it out gently. "Feed the child," he said. Lena's eyes widened. "Sir, don't thank me," Jonah said softly. "Just do it. Let them live." The merchants were stunned. One snarled, "One bar won't save them. You humans are fools." Jonah stood taller, calm but unyielding. "No, but what comes next might." Lena's hands shook as she took the ration bar. She looked down at her child, tears welling in her eyes. The little one tried to lift its head weakly, as if understanding that survival was finally within reach. Jonah did not leave. He stayed, silently watching, his presence alone creating a small island of protection in the sea of apathy and cruelty. Lena whispered thanks, but her voice cracked. She was too tired to speak, too hungry to be proud. For the first time in 3 days, hope touched her heart. Small, fragile, but real. The child's life could be saved. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could learn that sometimes. Even one human standing for another could change everything. Jonah Hale had walked through countless stations, seen countless injustices, and yet something about this one human mother froze him in place. Her body trembled, thin and fragile, yet her eyes burned with a stubborn light. In her arms, the child clung to life, small and pale, every breath a struggle. Jonah could feel the weight of her fear and the depth of her love radiating like a silent cry. The traders continued their laughter, cruel and loud. "What will you do, human? Beg louder? Or fight?" One sneered, Jonah did not move quickly. He did not shout or draw a weapon. He simply stepped closer. His boots made soft thuds against the cold metal floor, a rhythm of quiet defiance in the chaos. "Enough," he said. One word, calm, steady, yet heavier than any weapon. The merchants froze for a moment, confused by his confidence. "This doesn't concern you," one hissed, claws twitching. "Step back." Jonah's eyes didn't leave Lena. "It concerns anyone with a heart," he said. "Anyone who calls themselves human." Lena watched him, unsure if she dared hope. Her child whimpered softly, and her hands shook as she tried to soothe it. The little body was so frail, so small, that her heart ached at the thought of losing it. "Please," she whispered to Jonah, "please help us. I don't know how much longer." Her voice cracked, swallowed by fear and exhaustion. Jonah reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar, the standard issue for humans traveling through hostile sectors. He offered it gently, as if handling something precious. "Feed your child," he said. Lena's fingers trembled as she took it. I don't know how to," she began, but the child's weak hand curled around her finger. That small, fragile grasp made her heart leap. She carefully broke off a piece and held it close to the child's lips. The little one's mouth opened, instinct taking over. The first taste of sustenance in 3 long days. The merchant scoffed. "One bar won't save them," one said, disgust lacing his words. "You humans are sentimental fools." Jonah's jaw tightened. He did not respond with anger. He responded with action. Around the market, other humans began noticing him. Dock workers, traders, and station security paused, curious. A quiet ripple spread, a subtle awareness that this was not ordinary. Jonah didn't need to call them. Humans understood instinctively when another human needed protection. "You see this?" Jonah said quietly, but enough for those near to hear. "A mother and child are starving. She asks for nothing but scraps. And yet you mock her. Is that the world you want?" The merchant sneered, but the attention shifted. Curious eyes watched Jonah, and more humans stopped, forming a silent audience. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply stood, steady and unwavering. A human who refused to walk past suffering. Lena fed her child slowly, her hands shaking, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. Jonah knelt beside her, silently watching, ready if needed. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "You asked. That alone shows your strength." The child's small body stirred, gaining a little color from the ration. Lena pressed her forehead to the child's head and whispered, "Hold on. Just a little longer." Jonah straightened. He looked at the merchants one last time. "You will learn that humans will not ignore cruelty. Not here, not anywhere. One act of selfishness can ripple through 1,000 lives. You think you are strong. You are not. You will be held accountable." The merchants exchanged uneasy glances. Something was shifting. The market no longer belonged only to them. A quiet authority filled the space-human authority, unspoken but powerful. For Lena, that presence was more than protection. It was hope. For the first time in 3 days, she believed her child might survive. And for Jonah, it was a reminder. Even in a galaxy full of indifference, humans would stop. Humans would act. And humans would fight for those who could not fight for themselves. In that moment, in a noisy alien market, the galaxy witnessed something rare, a human refusing to look away. And sometimes that alone was enough to change everything. The market had been loud, chaotic, and cruel, but Jonah Hale's quiet presence shifted something unseen. The traders still laughed, still sneered, but the air felt heavier. The crowd, mostly aliens, felt the tension, though they did not yet understand its meaning. Humans, however, did. Somewhere in that noise, they knew this was a moment to act, even without orders. Jonah did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply stood firm, tall and unwavering, and stared at the merchants who had mocked Lena's desperate plea. His hand rested lightly on the console at his side, a gesture almost casual but deadly serious. He tapped it once. Then again, around the station, human traders, dockworkers, and security personnel paused. Screens flickered. Speakers hummed. Machines clicked. Instantly, the crowd sensed an organized presence rising like a tide beneath the surface of chaos. Jonah's action had triggered a chain. "You just violated Station Humanitarian Clause 7, he said calmly, his voice carrying across the small market. "Denial of surplus sustenance to a dependent child is illegal. Your actions will be reviewed. You will answer for this." The merchants laughed, a high, mocking, dismissive sound. "A human threatening aliens?" One said, tilting its head. "You amuse me. Go back to your tiny ship and leave us be." Jonah did not move. He only tapped his wrist console again. The market lights dimmed slightly, and small drones hovered near the traders. Screens above the market flickered, displaying the violation. Station security teams began activating, moving through corridors toward the outer ring where Lena knelt. "You have done wrong," Jonah said again, louder this time. "And humans will not stand by while children starve. You can laugh all you want. It will not change the law, nor will it change the consequences of your actions." A pause fell over the crowd. Humans stopped what they were doing. Alien traders exchanged uneasy glances. The laughter faltered, replaced by an uneasy silence. For the first time, the merchants felt observed. Not just by Jonah, but by every human around them, an unspoken judgment spreading like fire. The security drones buzzed closer. The merchants tried to hide their fear behind claws and tails, but they were cornered not by force, but by principle. Humans had laws. Humans had rules. And humans had something else, something the galaxy often underestimated: relentless moral weight. Jonah stepped toward Lena. "Your child will eat," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "No more waiting. No more pleading. Today, you survived because you did what every parent does you asked. You fought with words when strength failed." The little one stirred weakly, opening its eyes for the first time in days. Lena's hands shook as she fed the child small pieces of rationed food. Tears ran freely down her face. Relief and fear mingled together. For the first time in 3 days, she could breathe. Around them, humans began to act. Dock workers pulled trays from carts. Traders handed over packages of surplus food. Station personnel coordinated quickly, distributing warmth and nourishment. The scraps became meals. The meals became hope. One human had stopped walking, and that was enough to spark a chain reaction that no alien cruelty could extinguish. Jonah watched, silently proud, but careful not to intrude. He had done more than feed a child. He had reminded the galaxy that humans could not be ignored, that even a single human could make a stand against injustice, and sometimes that one stand could protect life itself. Lena looked up at him. How did you stop them?" she asked, still holding her child. Jonah shook his head lightly. "I didn't stop them," he said. "They stopped themselves. Humans are not always loud. Sometimes we only need to show that we are watching, that we will act, that we will not let cruelty pass unnoticed." The merchants were subdued now, their sneers gone. They had learned the truth. Humans could be patient, humans could be forgiving, but when the innocent suffered, humans became unstoppable. And for Lena, that quiet courage meant more than any law. It meant life. For the first time since the day began, the market felt different. Not safer, not brighter, but just enough to know that hope had arrived. And hope, in a place like Corvesh, was more powerful than any weapon. The market had fallen silent, but the air was thick with tension. Alien merchants no longer laughed. Their claws tapped nervously against metal tables. They sensed, though they did not understand, that they were in the presence of something larger than any law or rule. Something deeper, human resolve. Jonah Hawley did not need to shout. He simply stood, watching the merchant's every move. His eyes, calm yet unyielding, held the weight of countless battles and countless wrongs corrected. Around him, human station workers, traders, and security personnel formed an invisible shield, their presence quiet but undeniable. They had learned the hard way that when a human stood for justice, others would follow. Lena knelt on the cold floor, her child weakly grasping her fingers. Tears streaked her dusty cheeks. She fed her little one carefully, watching each small movement, each flicker of life. For the first time in 3 days, the child's lips touched food. Warmth and sustenance filled the tiny body. Every small bite was a victory. Every gulp a tiny rebellion against starvation. Jonah spoke again, his voice firm. You took food that could save a life and threw it away. You laughed at hunger. You laughed at innocence. Humans do not forget such things. The merchants shifted uneasily. They had underestimated this species. They had thought humans weak, sentimental, too soft to matter. They were wrong. Humans could beg, humans could endure, and humans could forgive, but when injustice became too blatant, human anger could weigh heavier than any weapon. Security drones hovered near, scanning the market. Alien traders muttered, clawed hands twitching. Fines were issued, licenses suspended, and confiscated food was gathered. Every scrap, every tray, every piece of warm, edible food was taken and placed before Lena and her child. Other humans, inspired by Jonah's stand, began to share. Small hands passed containers. Traders opened rations. Dock workers carried supplies. One by one, they fed Lena and her child, not out of pity, but because it was right. Justice, care, and compassion had rallied in a quiet, unstoppable wave. Lena looked around, overwhelmed. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know what to say. Jonah knelt beside her, careful not to overshadow the moment. You don't need to say anything, he said softly. Your courage brought this. You asked when others would have walked past. That is strength. That is love. That is human. The child stirred, small eyes blinking, full of fragile wonder. Each movement was a miracle. Lena pressed her forehead to the tiny head, tears falling freely. Her body shook, not from hunger, but from relief. For 3 days, she had lived in fear. Now, hope was real. Life was real. Humans continued to act. They worked silently, efficiently, without fanfare. Every tray of food placed before the mother and child was a statement. Cruelty would not pass unchallenged. Compassion was powerful. Justice could be delivered quietly but firmly. And humans, when united, could change the tide of any situation. Jonah rose and looked around the market. The merchants were subdued. Their arrogance had been tempered by the simple truth that humans did not ignore suffering. When pushed, they acted. When faced with injustice, they stood firm. And when the innocent were threatened, humans could wield their strength in ways the galaxy did not understand. Lena, holding her child close, whispered, "Thank you." Jonah shook his head. "No," he said quietly, eyes softening. "Your child lives because you loved more than you feared. Because you asked when it was hardest to ask. That is why they live. That is why humans survive." The market remained quiet, but the lesson had been learned. In a galaxy filled with indifference and cruelty, humans carried a weight that could not be measured in muscle or claws. Their anger, their courage, their love, it was unstoppable. For Lena, for her child, and for every human watching quietly. That day proved one truth. Sometimes the smallest act of bravery could awaken the power of a whole species. And that power could save lives. News traveled fast in the galaxy, faster than any trader or courier could imagine. A human mother begging for scraps. A child on the brink of death. And one human who refused to walk past cruelty. It spread across communication networks, screens flickering on ships and stations alike. The footage showed Lena kneeling, fragile and desperate, and Jonah standing firm, quiet but unyielding. The galaxy watched. For some, it was shocking. For others, it was unbelievable. How could a single human, so small in a vast universe, hold the weight of justice in a moment? Yet the images told the truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were protectors. They were fierce when it mattered. They were unstoppable when the innocent suffered. On Corvesh Station, humans and aliens alike replayed the footage. Dock workers pointed at the screen. Traders whispered. Children peered wide-eyed at the images. Lena's pleading voice, so full of pain, and Jonah's calm resolve, so firm, reminded everyone that compassion and courage could move mountains, even across species. Aid organizations mobilized. Human-run stations and outposts sent supplies. Programs were put in place to ensure no dependent child would be left starving in the outer rings again. The story became more than a single moment. It became a symbol of what humans stood for. The galaxy began to notice something it had never expected. Humans could fight. Humans could endure. Humans could forgive. But humans could also rise in righteous anger and demand justice, not just for themselves, but for the helpless and the innocent. That quiet strength, that unwavering care, became something to reckon with. Lena and her child became the center of a small network of help. Supplies arrived daily. Warm meals, clean water, and safe spaces for her little one. She never forgot the first ration bar Jonah had given. It was more than food, it was a symbol, proof that one human could ignite hope in a world built on indifference. Jonah, meanwhile, had moved on to another station. Another crisis, another moment where someone needed help. But his actions rippled outward. Humans watching him act felt inspired to act themselves. Small acts multiplied. Compassion spread. The galaxy learned, slowly but surely, that humans did not ignore suffering. Alien species began to talk quietly among themselves. Some tried to understand why humans seemed dangerous in ways they had not predicted. "They are too emotional," one whispered. "Too soft." Another replied, "Maybe, but look at what they can do when the innocent are threatened." The story of Lena and her child became a lesson, a warning, and an inspiration. The small act of asking for scraps had turned into a demonstration of human courage. The galaxy began to realize that humans were not weak. They were not naive. They were capable of empathy, and when pushed, they were capable of unstoppable resolve. And through it all, Lena's child grew stronger each day. The fear and hunger that had haunted the first 3 days faded. Life returned. Laughter returned. But the story remained. A constant reminder that sometimes, even the smallest plea, even the quietest act of desperation, could awaken the power of an entire species. The galaxy had learned a new truth about humans. They could not be underestimated. Compassion was their strength. Courage was their weapon. And when a child's life was at stake, humans would rise in ways no one could ignore. The story spread, hearts were changed, and the galaxy began to see humans differently. Humans had acted, not out of pride, not out of greed, but out of love. And that, the galaxy realized, was the most dangerous and beautiful power of all. Months passed, and the station that once had felt cold and indifferent now hummed with warmth and life. Lena had a small place in a human-run kitchen, preparing meals for others in need. Her child, once pale and fragile, laughed and played with the other children of the station. The little one's eyes shone with health, curiosity, and hope, the kind of hope that could not be bought, Only earned. Lena often thought back to the first day she had begged for scraps. She remembered the fear, the shame, the desperation. And she remembered Jonah Hawley, a man she had never known, yet who had stood when it mattered, who had reminded her that courage could be quiet, and mercy could be strong. One day, Jonah passed through the station again. Lena saw him and ran toward him, her child following close behind. "My child lives because of you," she said, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling with gratitude and emotion. Jonah shook his head gently, a small humble smile touching his lips. "No," he said softly. "Your child lives because you loved more than you feared. Because you asked when asking was hardest. That is why your child survives. That is why humans endure." Lena nodded, understanding the truth in his words. It was never just about Jonah's courage. It was about the strength and love that humans carried inside. About the quiet resolve that refused to let innocence suffer. Across the station, other humans watched, quietly proud. Aliens whispered among themselves, curious and cautious. "Why are humans so dangerous?" One asked. A seasoned trader, gray scales glinting under the artificial lights, shook their heads slowly. "Because when you threaten the innocent, humans never forgive. They rise, they act, and they protect each other in ways we do not understand." The lesson was clear. Across the galaxy, from tiny stations like Corvesh to massive trade hubs, humans were no longer underestimated. They were compassionate but relentless, gentle but unyielding, ordinary in appearance but extraordinary in courage. Lena watched her child laugh, spinning in the sunlight that filtered through the station dome. She felt an overwhelming gratitude for the humans who had acted, and for the human spirit that refused to be silent. She understood now that survival was not only about food or shelter, it was about love, about standing firm, and about fighting for life when life itself seemed impossible. Jonah placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Remember this," he said. "Humans are not just survivors. We are protectors. We endure. We rise. And when the innocent are in danger, we are unstoppable." Lena nodded, letting the truth of his words sink in. The galaxy had seen the strength of humans not in warships or weapons, but in mercy, courage, and the quiet, unwavering choice to protect life. Her child ran ahead, full of laughter and energy. Lena smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in months. The darkness of hunger and fear was gone. Life had returned, stronger and brighter than before. As Jonah walked away, a quiet voice spoke from nearby. "Humans, they are different." "Yes," another whispered. "They love, they fight, and they never ignore those in need. That is what makes them dangerous." And for the first time, the galaxy understood. Humanity's true power was not in destruction. It was in protection, in compassion, in the courage to stand when it mattered most. Lena held her child close, feeling their heartbeat against her chest. She whispered softly, "We are safe now. We will survive." And the child smiled, a small, radiant proof of what humans had always known. Love could conquer fear. Courage could overcome cruelty. And even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, hope would always survive. HFY.